Okay, we're ready to go. Let me go ahead and pull Ashley up. Sorry for the delay. We're 9 minutes late, but we can run late. We can run over. Next show's not for 2 hours. There you go. Oh, hang on a second. You're sideways. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, you're sideways. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
There you go. That's better. I did a show with a guy. What was his name? Charlie Riverman something. He's pretty well known. He's up in Maine, and
Hmm.
he, he was upside down the whole show, but it was so fitting. It was such a good fit. How, how you been doing? I'm sorry I'm late. It's good to see you again. How's it
Oh,
going?
it's good to see you. It's good to see you.
Yeah. So yeah, and things are moving so fast in the last 2 3 days. I can barely keep my head on straight. And
I
to
understand.
keep keep functioning with these 3D things. This is the second. This is Ashley Lee for everybody who doesn't know on the live and the replay. If these shows resonate, please share. We're getting hammered by the further constricting social media uh, things. And but anyway, if you don't mind, share to your page or to one group. That'd be great. Yeah, Ashley, we haven't seen you in about a month.
Yes.
What's happening? What do you want to talk about today? I'm open to whatever you want to talk about.
Oh, I'm open too. You know, I just finished a TV show that I'm creating on Awake TV network. That's
Right
about
on.
quantum energy healing, and we talked
Wow.
about creating quantum energy healing versus quantum energy destruction. So we
Ooh,
can. I
let's
know.
uh, let's di- let's dive into that a little bit. So
Okay.
you talked about creating quantum healing versus quantum destruction. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, like to me, let me rephrase it. Maybe I'm not saying that this is what it is. I'm just trying to get my arms around it. So,
Yes.
like we've always been creating. We weren't conscious of our ability to control that creation, so to speak.
Correct.
Um, And so sounds to me like, quantum healing, or you could say quantum alignment or quantum flow. Um,
So what we talk about
or
in the quantum field is that our thoughts, no matter what they are, sorry about that, no matter what
it's
they
all right.
are, I had got a funny knock on the door. That's interesting. From quantum healing comes the idea that our thoughts create form,
Yeah.
and through how our thoughts create form is what happens is we get very deeply involved with what it is we're thinking. And whether that thinking is positive or negative impacts the quantum field. And it impacts it by frequencies that come from our body, come from our hearts, come from our mind. And as those frequencies come out or emit from our physical incarnate bodies, what happens is they interact with quantum particles. And those quantum particles start to move and change and create, come up to or clump to or come to atomic particles and start to change our atomic world. And so
Yeah,
what I
I get that.
described, yeah, it's pretty cool. And so what we described in that way is what happens to people who think really great thoughts. Like, let's say that you're wanting to create quantum energy healing or energy healing for yourself, but you have a self judgment about, I'm not good enough, or I can't heal myself, or it doesn't work because I don't feel better right in this minute. And so when we go into doubt or concern, we actually emit those doubts and concerns. Those interact with the quantum field, and it distinguishes or destroys the opportunity to create the healing we are actually intending. So when we have
Yeah.
negative thoughts, unfortunate thoughts, frustrating thoughts, even maybe even as deep as disgusting thoughts for other people or situations, when we emit that, it activates the quantum field, and the quantum field then responds by interacting with atomic particles, And that's what creates that level of destruction or problems, more illness, conditions, or diseases. And when
So
we have,
really, I mean, so really, the fact is we're affecting the quantum field regardless of what's coming out of us.
yes,
And so we're moving into a space now where we're more conscious of our unconsciousness, and we're more conscious of our actual ability to be master creators, way beyond the big words that sounds like.
yeah,
And so this, and people talk about healing, alignment, integration, expansion, elevation, but it really gets down to, at some level, I guess, is taking on the responsibility for our thoughts, understanding that our thoughts don't just affect us, but it affects others too. Does the quantum healing and or quantum destruction, let me put it a different way. If there's an external thing, whether that thing is the house I live in and how I look at it, or the car I drive and how I look at it, and therefore the thoughts that I send towards it. Is there any difference between a car, a house, and a person? Do we affect that person, but based on our thoughts? Like you said a minute ago, even if you had like
I,
disgusting thoughts towards somebody?
yeah, I actually do think so. I'm going to use a really fun thought experiment. I call them thought experiments around the house. So we live in Carlsbad, California, where it's actually dry and arid. It's very sunny all the time, and the humidity is rather low. But I grew up in Hawaii, and so did my husband. And when we're in the shower, right, we think of mold growth because it's pretty common in Hawaii because of the humidity, right? So I said, well, let's run a, so mold is a form of a pathogen, also known as a yeast, right, or a fungus. And what happens is that carries a consciousness, and we emit that idea that, oh, in the shower is wet and it's humid and it'll grow mold. I said, what if we change that idea? What if we change the idea that even though it's arid and humid in the shower, it doesn't need to or necessarily grow mold, and that the shower stays clean and free of fungus? And sure enough, when we did that, a month later, it never grew mold where it normally would, and we would clean it. So that's an example of how we look at our house, our environments, and how we view the beliefs that we have about them. And so that does affect the environment that we create. That's just a
Yeah.
simple example.
And so, I mean, but it is. I mean, and again, this is a microcosm example because everything, it really is the same equation, each situation, moment by moment. But so each one of you, when you got into the shower, you projected those thoughts. Is that what you were
Yes.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked my husband to do it too. He thought it was pretty funny. But it really worked. And there was way less mold growth in a month than it normally had. And so
And no bleach.
no bleach, no bleach. Hawaii's,
But
yeah,
I
we
mean,
get used to bleach.
this is interesting because we've moved from a I don't know, like a phase in the ascension, or several, I guess, where first, if you go back, at least a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about protection, you know, and saging everything. I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm just saying the whole idea, kind of like what people talk about with healing. They say, you know what, I'm not going to use that word anymore because it doesn't exist in the space that we're creating, or 5D, or whatever you want to call it. And I guess it would work the same way in a sense with the other. But
Yes, what we
you
really
know,
need is protection from our not so wonderful thoughts, our not so wonderful
yeah,
emotions.
yeah, yeah.
And so
And people,
instead, what we want to do is create that consciousness shift, right? That change
yeah,
in awareness, so that we don't have to protect ourselves, because in the quantum field, everything is connected,
yeah,
and
yeah.
everything. So that's how come
Which,
we can energy heal even remotely over vast
yeah,
distances.
yeah. Exactly. And so, like, it's evolved to where that has the word protection, or at least getting protection from something external, is starting to kind of feather out and fade away, because that protection, and now it's not the right word probably, but is lives and dies, begins and ends with, like you said, with the thoughts that we're carrying forward. And I
That's
guess where I
correct.
was going with it, is you see, and you still see it. I mean, I do. I pick up on it in the news feed. People saying so and so sending me energy and attacking me. And maybe this was true to an extent when we had less of an awareness, but it seems like as we step more and more into our sovereignty, that I guess, when you look at it, one of the gauges or barometers of it is how how mm, level our path is. In other words, we're not having these fluctuations anymore because we are more aware and taking responsibility for our thoughts, because we do affect other people.
Exactly. We sure do. And this idea of psychic attack, I think, is a great, or psychic bullying, is a great topic for today as well, because when the veil thins, right, the veil of our awareness, right, the veils of our awareness opens. When it opens, we, as a society, really need to become more responsible for our thoughts and feelings. Because somehow, I'm not really sure how, but when the veil was thicker and the world was a little denser, there was a little padding between us and others. It was probably our belief system, because we believed we're separate, or that our thoughts or feelings are private to our own experience. But in fact, they're not, and they never have been. And I think for some people, they're more aware of it than others. But I think as our awareness begins to grow and expand, even our ugly thoughts, our unhappy thoughts, our angry thoughts get transmitted. And when we're thinking of a specific person and we transmit those anger thoughts, even the person that may not be awake or aware that we can send thoughts like this may feel suddenly angry, may feel that they're, or that you're angry at them, right? And then don't understand why. But most people
Yeah.
in society, we don't respond and we don't go, hey, I needed to call you because I sensed you're angry at me. Are you angry at me? Can we talk about this? Can we create a conversation that actually
Yeah.
supports your needs and what's happening? We're not used to doing that just yet, but I want to support, and I know you do. That's why you have these gorgeous conversations, is to support this authentic speaking with one another.
Yeah.
And I think that's what
Definitely.
we're really talking about. Yeah, is saying, okay, I'm mad at you. I'm triggered. I'm upset.
Yes.
This isn't okay.
Yes.
This is a bad thing. I'm so triggered. I want to create a boundary with you, but I know the reality is there is no boundary. And
Yeah.
so with
So
that,
just, yeah, I mean, yeah, I like that, because I think the boundary thing, yeah, exactly. There are no boundaries.
there
And you hear
is.
people talking about boundaries, and I'm not knocking them, and I understand where they're coming from, but we keep moving up and the truth changes, right? And
Yes.
it's like, if you took an example like from our old 3D life, and we've all been there, and you had a parent or a sibling or a spouse that degraded you, and
Yes.
maybe that's a strong word, but like, hey, you need to lose some weight. Hey, you talk too much. Hey, you're too arrogant. Hey, whatever the programming that was coming out of their mouth, because of their role within your life, it affected us. Now,
Yes.
that was verbal. That was verbal. That was even, coming in, harder, I guess, than the thoughts. But the thoughts actually are where it lives and dies, because we also have experienced people saying one thing and we know they really mean another, and we do feel it. You can
That's
tell,
correct.
especially
Yes.
as time goes on. So yeah, I think
When
we
you can
spent
feel
so
the
much time.
emotion behind the, you can feel the emotion behind the
Yeah.
thought or the action of the words, right? So if a thought
Yeah.
starts first and it can be very primitive, it can just be a little tickle or a niggle of something, then it develops into a fuller thought, which is usually laden with judgments or assumptions
Mm.
or
Yeah.
ideas of what we believe it is, based a lot on the past experiences
Yeah.
and where we think someone or something or the environment is coming from. And we get into an idea or a concept of fear or overwhelm or concern, or that we can't get our needs met, or we are powerless to make any changes in that situation.
Yeah.
And then we
Sure.
lay it
Yeah.
in that context inside of it, then we start having those emotions, triggers, and deeper thought
Yeah.
patterns. And then we admit them out to the person or the situation, and they can feel that.
Well, and then the other thing is the behavioral patterns. We've had behavioral patterns that we've come to understand and say, oh my God, this is why I do this. But now they're even going deeper and deeper. And you're like, I didn't
Right.
know that one was there. And so that's another thing is, just stepping out of that, um, stepping out of that old type of behavior. In that, in other words, like we are creating it. Okay.
Yes.
Morgan has a saying: if you look for it, you'll find it. Okay.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's
Yes.
like we have a pattern. I know I had a pattern big time, going back even like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I had it for like the previous 3 or 4 or 5 years when I supposedly was awake, which was when I started to get distraught or I started to get a little bit nervous or worried. I would call somebody. I would reach back to, let's just say, my past. Could be a family, could be a friend, and I would start rehashing this stuff. That was really what I was trying to shed. The other thing would be when I would call people to hear what I wanted to hear. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like talking to people that are going to tell me or blow smoke up my, you know what I mean? I mean, it's just
Yeah, exactly.
but seriously, but these are just like second nature, like riding a bike. And I started to pull these apart a little bit a couple of years ago and think, well, wait a minute, I can't go there. I think back to another example would be for anyone who's ever lost somebody. They talk
Hmm.
about pictures. Like if you have an album that like after it happens, it's okay to go through it once, but to keep going through it over and over again, you're just entrenching that frequency of prolonged sadness or what have you, in your field. So it's the same type of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's what we create those discernments in when we have a more opportunity to access our unconscious. That's those thoughts, right, that we don't know we're having. But when we access them and we notice a little niggle or something's funny, we have the opportunity to change them around. We have the opportunity to let go of the emotions that cause trigger and to recognize that we can actually create change by, let's say the emotion is anger or frustration, and say, I'm really frustrated with this situation and it's outside of me, right? Somebody else is doing it, whatever it
Yeah.
is, not doing the dishes or whatever. And in that situation, let's use on the freeway as a good example. In a car, right? Somebody cuts you off and
Yeah.
you get angry or irritated because you felt or you discerned that they didn't care about you. But actually, it could be a multitudes of reasons of why they cut you off, why they weren't paying attention, whatever was going on. And so then we get mad at each other, right, on the freeway, and then we send bad juju, right? Well, I hope
Right.
someone does that
Right.
to you. And actually, we don't realize that that can actually contribute to a big car collision, right?
Mm,
Lots of cars piling up on each other because I hope that happens to you. Actually, what we want to say is, did you realize that you might have cut me off? Would you
mm,
like to recognize that it's okay? I understand you weren't paying attention. It's a good idea to pay attention to help you and all others
mm.
on the road. So when we send those kinds of juju and vibes to the other driver, it actually maybe helps them become more alert, more
Yeah.
aware of their environment. Because I don't know anybody on the road that really wants to take anybody else out unless we've got some fascinating road rage and some other things going on. But most people want to be kind, want to be supportive, want to promote everyone having a safe and happy day, for example. And
Yeah.
when we do that, I think it's good to remind ourselves, oh, I was triggered. It's okay. I was triggered. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But I can let go of that feeling in order to really help everyone out on the road, for example.
Yeah. And how much can it affect us, or how much does it affect us, what we feed our vessel with, our body, our mind, body, at least mind, body. I don't know, maybe spirit and soul, but our mind and body, what we feed it. Like people talk about, I don't watch the news anymore. But what's the difference in watching the news and looking for stuff that you're diametrically opposed to on a news feed? or even posting about these things. I mean, how important or not important, how influential or not is it what we feed our source, our operating system.
Well, I think you're getting into a deeper level, which is really beautiful, about the idea of why do we do what we do? So why do we watch the news? Well, I have several postulated ideas. One is because we grew up in a society where the punishment model was appropriate. So that is, find the bad in someone, let them know about it, let them have self judgments on themselves and others so that they can punish themselves to do better. What if that doesn't really work? And I don't think that's worked for millennia of time for humanity, creating the punishment model.
No.
Instead, what if we're able to increase our awareness of what's going on? Really perform, like if I watch the news, which I haven't watched the news for 8 or 9 years, I'm still mind boggled by people that do, because we actually give power to that. Whatever we
Yeah.
pay attention to, we give power to. And so lots of people tell me nowadays, I watch it so that I can have a different thought about that. I want to change my thoughts. And I said, well, okay, what if your thoughts already are changed if you want to change a thought? And so instead, what do you want to do with those bad guys on the news?
Mm,
Well, they
mm,
deserve to go to jail. I'm like, okay, does jail really work? Does it
mm.
really help them when they feel remorse and they feel worse about themselves? Are they really getting themselves better? Are they getting more conscious? Or are they actually suppressing more of their bad feelings? And I think we're
You and them,
suppressing.
you and them both. You and them
Yeah,
both. Well, I mean,
exactly.
think about it. I mean, seriously. I mean, and I do understand the thing about. I think those are both valid. One, I watch it to disengage from it. I can't relate to that, but I can respect it. One, I don't watch it at all, which is where I'm at. But if we could easily, just as easily, be making a different choice, and that choice would be, let's say I want to go this direction, or a higher understanding, or higher awareness, or higher integration, and seeking something that, like food for the soul, whatever that may be, because it's probably different, for everybody.
Right.
Everybody's got their own path and all that stuff. So I can see on one hand the contrast of saying, hey, let me see what's going on the world stage, but on the other hand, I really can't because it's getting so ridiculous. It's like a cartoon. uh you know
Right. And
we
it
we
definitely feeds consciousness challenges or problems that we experience that infects our integrity.
Yeah.
And yeah,
and
right. We,
and
we get an
and
integrity
contribute.
infection.
Yeah, and it contributes to the collective experience.
It sure
So,
does.
and I know we're talking about the thoughts we carry forward, which is where it begins and ends. But that's why I was asking the question, because it would just seem to me, like you said earlier, where your focus is. And I know that sounds a little cliche, but the truth is, if I'm looking over here, I'm looking over here. I'm not looking
Well,
over here,
yeah, well,
where I'd
think about
like
it
to.
just from a basic quantum energy concept. If you're a transmitter and you're constantly emitting information out to the world, inside your body and out to the world, and your thoughts translate that, right? That emission, that energy transmission. How much of your day do you spend in negativity? How much of
Mm,
your day do you discern this is bad, this is good, this is bad, this is good? You're bad,
mm,
you're bad, you're bad, you have to be punished. All of those kinds of concepts. We continue to feed society through this emissions about what is bad, what isn't good, and what we have to fix. And I said,
yeah.
we absolutely, it's no problem discerning when we have a problem in front of us and we need to repair it or fix it. Go for it, do that. But what if we don't have to do it with negativity? What if we don't have to do it with lack of compassion, lack of understanding? What if we let go of all those judgments? No, you were being bad because you were being manipulative. Well, I don't know anybody that wakes up in the morning saying, gosh, I think I'm going to be manipulative today, right? Most
Hmm.
people wake up, if they are expressing a manipulative behavior, they're waking up saying, I can't get my needs met. So how am I going to
Yeah.
get them met? I have to manipulate the
They're on
world
the
around me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the yes, and the first step is awareness. And what you're kind of saying is, if they're waking, they're going to get to that point. If they're getting agitated already, they're not happy. It's not working out. They're going to be looking. I think there's a school of thought that's coming out now, or you're seeing some posts and expressions on it, which is there's enough information now. People, we have enough
Yes.
information. We don't need to
Yes.
go out and wake people up anymore. It's already started the process, which then takes me to, okay, where do we go from here? Which my question to you would be, is it is it is it a part of the new paradigm, part of this new earth, for us to focus in our local field like you do, okay, with you and your colleagues, and do the good work on, say, a one-to-one basis if you're a practitioner, or small groups or that type of thing, versus trying to go out and change the world and gather a bunch of people to march down the street with you?
I think all of them are valuable. I think the most important aspect of this idea is to consider it's all about relating. It's how we relate to ourselves, like our body, our physical body, how we relate to our mental body, our thoughts and feelings and values, how we emote, how we get triggered and create emotions, which accelerate energy in the physical world. And then our spiritual, how do we relate with ourselves spiritually? Like our life purpose, our understanding. What do I want to do and be here? What gifts do I want to bring forward to myself and the world? I think that's really
Mm,
important. And then how do we relate with our environment? Do we hate it? Is it dry? Is it wet? Is it humid? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? Is it cold? Whatever it is, right? We have these ideas of whether we like that or not. And we keep discerning, I like it, I don't like it. I like it, I don't like it. And what if we can get off that duality idea of like and don't like? What if it's all part of our experience and it's how we relate with ourselves, each other, and then with the world around us? I call our life circumstances that we create. What does that mean?
yeah, yeah,
And then from there, I honestly think then we look at where would we like to focus our energy. Okay, in this hour, I'd like to focus it here. We're here right now, one on one, and one with the world, providing this live broadcast that's live and pre-recorded. And this is an opportunity now. I'm sharing with myself, I'm sharing with you, and we're sharing with the world. And the world shares with us by watching. So they participate in the process as well, even if they're not speaking with us. They are speaking to
mm,
us. And they're
yeah,
sharing,
right on.
what are they sharing? They're sharing, I like this, I don't like this, I'm confused. How do I create this in my own life? How do we create this in our own life? I think you're right. You've said it many, many times on many broadcasts is we start with ourselves. We start to
Yeah,
understand.
yeah,
And what I like to really do, especially for the children, is to share with them perspectives so that it's in their languaging so that they can talk. They can talk this way, they can talk this way, and they can talk with their hearts. But how would they like to share and relate with the world from the perspective that they're coming from? So I described 5 perspectives, right? Me to myself, me to you, Todd, and then Todd,
mm,
you to me, and then me to the world, and then the world to me. How do we, in those perspectives, and there's even more, I thought we'd start with 5 perspectives. Where is the energy coming from? What is the energy being delivered, the information? And how do I process it? Where do I go, and
mm.
what would I like to achieve with that? And so I
Yeah, let's
teach
talk about.
children. Yeah, I
Yeah,
teach children about the speaker and the listener. And I think it's so valuable, even for young children. If you're speaking and you want to say something, then did you capture the listening from your parents or the teacher or other children? Are they hearing you? If they're not hearing you or they don't understand you, how can you step into their perspective to understand what it is that how you can share it in a way that they can understand? Because we
mm,
are in a world in such massive transition that lots of people are in lots of different awarenesses and are coming from varied perspectives. When we
yeah,
understand the perspectives, we have a lot more compassion for what's going on. And I think that's what's
Yeah.
so valuable is when we incorporate compassion, and that doesn't mean pity or sorrow anymore. It means less judgments, no judgments, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
We had
when we,
we had Mary Rodwell on yesterday, a pretty well-known lady out of Australia, and on a couple of things that you brought up that came back while you were saying that, I don't want to forget. One was she was talking about we were talking about what we were talking about, which was the extremes or the perceived extremes. And she said, well, and she's been doing this for years and years and years. She said, we this is a duality. We came in
yes,
here, and this is whether you're dealing with a non-physical energy or a physical manifested energy in front of you. We're here to be, be exposed to all of that, and our mission, or whatever you want to call it, is simply to find what resonates with you and what doesn't. And
yes,
and I thought, wow, that's pretty simple, but that actually makes sense. I mean, I've always said, it's like you put a kid in a room full of toys. There's some toys they're going to go play with, and some that they won't, in their perfect, genuine childlike wonder and innocence. And we're the same. The other thing that
yes.
she brought up, which I want to get into with you, is she also, in her practice, works with children. Now
Awesome.
we started talking about, she's working with this 8-year-old and this 9-year-old and this 10-year-old, and she does hypnotherapy plus one. She kicks it up more, I would say, more of an energy practitioner, where she opens her space, participates, observes, and works, in tandem with the higher energies involved as well, of the other person, and so on. Which was really interesting in these conversations she was relaying to us with these children. Now, just a quick backdrop. Uh, what is your role with children? What are you doing? And what are some of the intel coming out of these innocent, untarnished minds?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. I'll take a drink of water for that one. So there's lots of different environments where children express their needs and their purpose and their process in life. I have recognized over the last 8 or 9 years that the children are coming in very open and very awake. And what does awake mean? To me, it means they know they're not separate. They know they're not separate from God, from whatever God it is they believe in, source, nature. They know that we're all connected, and yet they're born into a world that believes that we're disconnected, that believes that we're separate, we're individual. We do have individuated experiences, and we're unified. And we don't yet quite know that because this brain and nervous system and our society's brain and nervous system created a different doctrine. And that doctrine says we're separate and we're individuated. And so from this idea, they get confused. They want to belong because they know they already belong. But they don't have the words to describe it because our languaging doesn't yet describe all of the ways that we truly are being. For example, the young ones, when they talk about, on the playground, it's the bestest, 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 best ever situation. Well, that's speaking in superlatives. We don't really have that. And a lot of adults will then say, that's not proper English, right? Don't say bestest, best of bester. I think that's where superfragilistic Kelly, that word
Funner.
came from. Yes, funner.
Funner. I like
Funner,
funner.
bester, everything. And so what they're doing is they're illustrating the true abundance of the world. They're truly illustrating that because when we judge that something is good, we set a judgment creates a wall between this is the judgment and the judgment I have between me and myself. This is good. And it's great that it's good. No one's saying that, being good enough is fantastic. Also, when we let go of good, for an example, as a judgment, we open our world to possibilities we haven't seen before. And more good and gooder and goodest gets to come in. because we do
And
live in abundant universe.
yeah, and it becomes funner.
It becomes a lot funner.
So, like,
Way funner.
yes, right. So, like in the case of Mary Rodwell, uh, the environment is she's a practitioner, uh, and she basically helps people to I don't know, what would you call it, kind of coalesce and strengthen and connect the relationship between their multiple aspects, and other, also pulling information through hypnosis, past life, this and type and that type of thing, but very much up in here, which doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what is the environment, because in her case she's seeing stuff, but she's also hearing a lot of stuff from these children, and they're talking about, like, one of them says, I'm a mantis, and I know what I look like, and I go see my family every night when I go to bed, and when I'm done with this life I'm going back to being a mantis. So another one said, I go up into the ship, there's other children, some of them I know, some of them I don't know, some are human, some are don't look to be human because they got big eyes, and but we're all trained and told things, and we go back to work. So the environment is kind of it's kind of a little bit of both, a little bit of Q&A and a little bit of up in here. What's the environment where you're having these conversations with these children? Like, how are they walking in the door? Are they walking in there looking for alignment? Are they coming to functions that you put on, or how do you come across them?
So I support children all over the world, and many of them come through their parents wanting to support them in many different
Mm.
ways. So they may have physical symptoms and problems that they want to, remediate or heal, allergies, autoimmune, all kinds of problems or situations, conditions, diseases, or illnesses. Then they may come through mentally where they're struggling to think or process clearly in school. And many times those kids are multisensory kids. They're highly,
ADHD.
well, I have a question
I
about
mean, I'm not.
ADHD. I
Yeah, I'm
think
not
I
saying
think
I'm not.
honestly
I'm
these
not.
kids
Yeah,
are able to
yeah.
have multiple states of awareness at the same
Yes.
time.
Yeah. I'm
So
right. I'm just
they
saying these are the
experience,
these are the
right.
kids. These are the kids that are labeled ADHD
Yeah.
and Asperger's and things like that. That was
Right.
really what I
So
was saying.
no, you did a great job, and I think bringing that up is really important because I think really honestly from my heart, from every part of me, I do sense and know that we are multisensory beings, and
Yeah.
we have a brain and nervous system that has been conditioned and suppressed inside societal norms, if you could call it that, and other areas of suppression that have occurred on the planet that have really created a mind bending problems for people. And these kids are coming in having multisensory awareness. So think about it just from a simple standpoint. There's a child in the classroom, he's very sensitive to the energies of life around him. He can hear the fluorescent lights ting and ticker and make noise. He can see them flicker when other people can't see it because he sees photon strings a little bit differently, right? He can stretch time and compress time because a lot of these kids live in different dimensional awarenesses. They can live in and
Right.
outside of time. Their hearing and their opportunity for getting auditory stimulation changes. They have different thresholds of tolerance of how they can handle it in a physical body. They may not know how to work with their physical body to enhance, master, and understand how to not control, but master these sensory abilities. And so a lot of times they look disheveled, disorganized, and unable to pay attention. Well, it's important, I think, for everyone around the world when you have a child like that, or even an adult, and they're having a hard time getting grounded or paying attention, say, what are you attending to?
Mm.
And if they say the lights flickering, say, I know it can't. Fluorescent lights need to leave classrooms. They're not healthy. We need more natural sunlight. We need more technology to produce that if we're doing it in darker times, right? Or a closed classroom, whatever that situation is. We need to have understanding that kids can hear beyond the walls. So there might be a child in the classroom that hears other kids in another class playing outside in the playground. And then you ask the child, what are you experiencing? He says, I hear my friends Johnny and Billy talking on the playground. They're talking about what they want to do this weekend. Pretty exact information, right? And so you know that they're not just making that up. And so as a teacher, you can say, okay, that's really great that you can hear beyond the walls. It's awesome. But what I want you to do is I want you to focus back in the classroom. It's important because this information I'm giving you is going to be on the test, let's say, or something like that. And that helps them reorganize their thoughts and feelings and understanding of the sensory information they're getting.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find these kids to be very talkative, or do you have to like pull their teeth to get them to talk to you?
I think some of them are talkative and some of them aren't. I think it really depends on the type of family that they're in. If they're in a family that's very grounded, if what we call the 3D and 4D, very time, very linear oriented, very logical and critical thinking oriented, they're going to be highly sensitive kids that are used to not talking about what it is they experience because the parents may believe that what they're experiencing is made up and not real. And again, that's why it's so important and helpful to express perceptions, even to the parents. Okay, so that was a child's perception, and now what is yours? Because I think in our older society, I want to say 60s and younger, maybe 1960s and younger, we didn't acknowledge children. They just had to kind of listen to what the adults had to say. We, as adults, felt that children can't understand and are little and need to be little innocent kids. There's nothing about innocence about this. This is just called awareness. Yeah. And awareness is a beautiful thing. And if a very young child has a tremendous amount of awareness, foster it, grow it, allow the child to develop languaging around that so that they can share in a way that's really vivid, authentic, and true. I think that's why a lot of us adults, we're running around saying, oh, you're not being authentic. Well, maybe we're not being authentic because we grew up in an environment where it was not okay to express how we're really truly thinking and feeling.
And if you spot it, you got it.
Yes.
You handle your shift, I'll handle my shift, and we'll meet in the middle on the Soul Highway, right? I want to go back to what you said earlier because I found that really interesting. I know you were talking about kids, but I think it applies to everybody. And there was those 5 things you were talking about. But just to drill down on one aspect of it, you got me to thinking, right? You were saying when you want to say something, and you were saying it to a child, but it could be to anybody, the way I see it. When you want to say something, think about who's listening, right? You were saying something along these lines, like think about who's listening, like where are they coming from? What are they really going to hear? Wow, that's just like mind blowing to me because you know, I can say something to you, right? And I can say it without being given any consideration to you know, what ears are listening. But if I stop and think, if I know you well enough or I know enough, I can say, before I say anything, I can take that in and I can see where you could actually say the same thing 2 different ways. It would sound like 2 totally different ways, but you're really saying the same thing because you're taking into account the ears that are listening.
Right, exactly. Even
so
the dogs.
Could you right? There's no mistakes here. There's no coincidences. So can you just take me through the mechanics of that again? Maybe I'll pick up something else. I'm just curious to see
it's beautiful. I've learned it from great mentors in the world and opportunity to share with each other. And we really, and receiving downloads from the universe, right? And that's us tapping into omniscience and information. So the universe, from the way that I view it, is 3 aspects that are main energies in life that create our life and form. Is omniscience, that is all knowing, is all around us, and we can tap into that. Omni-love, love flows through everything. And I know this may be a deep concept, but love can also not look pretty sometimes. We're still love. We're still love.
Says that. Morgan says love isn't always pretty.
Yeah, it isn't always pretty. Right. And then there's omnipresence, which is the now moment, which is the now moment. And the now moment is inside time and space, and it extends time and space. So we can experience in the now moment the past, the present, and the future. And we can expand it and collapse it and play with it and be with it. And then inside consensus with other people, we follow a time clock so that we meet together on Zoom at the right time, right? So that helps us really condense that idea. So when we come forward with those ideas, and that's what the kids are coming forward with, that's what they recognize and know. And now from that basis, will you re-presence your question? Because I actually got off a little bit, and share with me again,
No, no,
because it's a beautiful question.
well, it wasn't really just more. It wasn't really a question, but just a request for further elaboration in case there's more there. And that was
Okay, yes.
basically
So now
yeah.
understanding that, now I remember. Thank you for represencing it. It's about setting the speaking and the listening, because that is really imperative inside the relating, right? So when we relate and how we speak, right? We speak with our body language, we speak with light, right? We speak with lots of different kinds of energies. It's funny because the sun is changing, so I'm changing my view. But what I want to say that's so beautiful about this is how we relate is really valuable. It's valuable to our experience, it's valuable to the conversation, and it's valuable to the relationship. And when we have that value, that goodness in our heart, and it feels so good, that's what gives us value for living life and having fun and loving. And even when it's not pretty, it allows us to augment that and correct it or
Yeah.
fix it or change it. And so going back to that idea is when we recognize that there are multiple perspectives and I'm the speaker, what I want to do is get really, really well versed in understanding how to develop languaging. And so that languaging is nonverbal, like body language. That languaging is how I'm emitting my thoughts and feelings, even while I'm speaking with words. Then how I'm speaking
I
with
like that.
words. Am I
that.
speaking to everyone that everyone can understand, whether you're way elevated inside your wakefulness and your awareness, or whether you're bogged down to death with the job, with the grind, with the daily work, with everything else? How can I speak in such a way where all my words, all of my energy coming forward makes sense to everyone?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what's so
True.
awesome, because then we can take responsibility for that by saying, not like self-denigration and saying, oh, I did a bad job. Instead saying,
Hmm.
okay, how could I do this deeper? How could I do this better? How could I set the speaking so that it makes a lot of sense for
Yeah.
me and everyone else? And then when I set the listening, if I have a listening that can't really hear me or understand what I'm saying, what I'll do is I'll start by asking a small soundbite question. And when I ask that small soundbite question, like, how are you? Or what can I do for you? Or I sense you're struggling. I'm not sure what it is. I might be sure, but I want them to connect to it. So I'll
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
something like, I'm not really sure, because I want to honor their ego. I want to honor where they're at. And
Yeah.
so in that honoring, and they don't may not understand where I'm coming from. So I'll say something like, I sense that you're struggling. How may I help you? How may I support you?
Yeah.
And they'll go, I'm not struggling. And say, okay, it's okay. When and if you'd like to talk about anything that you're experiencing, please let me know, and I'm here for you. And then what it does, it starts to calm them down, and they get less triggered, and then they're able to start to express their authentic feelings, because they didn't feel
Yeah.
that maybe it was safe because they thought complaining is bad. We never ask them to complain. We ask them just to share what their struggles are.
Yeah. Well, what I like about that too, what I learned, and I'm gonna thank you for that, is as you were talking about that, I thought, well, you know what? Because I try to keep things simple, like simple affirmations or commands, right? So it's what's the first language? So if
Right.
I look at where I've come from and where I'm at, what I'm seeking, uh, then I can look at it and go, you know what? If I can start to look at my thoughts, which is connected to my telepathy, which
Right.
is, obviously connected to my intuition, and
Yes.
I can look at that as my first language, you know, formulating it here, taking a little more time, and then putting it out. Because what you're describing to me is like that universal voice, or let's say highest potential of your voice or your throat chakra, is like an
Mhm.
alignment. It's really like an alignment within you and your different, your different aspects, that is actually connected to, everyone else, that there therefore creates that universal or more universal verbalization that you're talking about. Yeah, I like that.
Exactly. And when we're in an environment where we feel we may not be understood by the information that we'd like to provide or support people with, when we ask them small questions, what's so awesome is that when you ask a question as a speaker, you're automatically waiting for a response. Well, that waiting for a response is listening. So you're
Yeah,
showing the listener that you're listening. And when you're illustrating to the listener that you're listening, they'll listen more because they feel heard too.
yeah. Good point. Good point.
So it's
Yeah,
very
I mean, really,
helpful.
well, yeah, because I mean, I think we all can fall into that. We can all fall into, well, what's the old saying? And I know we spend so much time using these superlatives, most people, all people, or, they're not
Right.
awake, whatever. But anyway, the one about, you know, people don't really listen. Uh,
Yeah.
they, they're thinking about what they're going to say next. Right.
Right.
And I think that's another thing that's starting to
Because we're
show
bogged
its
down
face.
with this idea, right, that we can't access our unconscious thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
But we can when we give people some space and some
Yeah.
room. And the most important part of that formula is compassion.
Yeah.
When we provide an opportunity for the listener to start speaking, for example, we have an opportunity when we project no judgments. We just literally let them go.
Yeah.
And when we project no judgments, the person, no matter how awake or unawake or any kind of way they are, they feel that. And then
Yeah.
they feel safe to communicate. Now,
You
there's
know,
lots
these
of
are
us.
like,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, these are like I remember I had a friend years ago used to work for me back in my life, and he was in the military, and he was, in some branch where he was dealing with psychology,
Hmm.
and I was introduced to a lot of little tidbits like this. Now they were more manipulative and
Yes.
controlling, and
Yeah.
less, idealistic. Let's put it that way.
That's
But I
where
can
I want
see,
to share with the kids, like
yeah,
NLP is a little bit that way too, where we try to hack the
mhm,
brain. I don't want to hack the
yeah,
brain anymore. We want to get the ego to be in congruence and confluence with us.
yeah.
We want to
Well,
use
I see it
ego
like a,
as a tool, right? As a survival tool. This will help us. Okay, I'm in a strange place. I don't feel
yeah.
safe. Which road do I go down? And your ego is going to say turn left because that's where the person is not. And so okay, I'm going to turn left, right,
Yeah,
instead
I,
of
I
going
see it.
right.
I see it like the way I visualize it as you're talking about it, is like you're opening them up. You're actually not trying to God, you're not trying to like tell them what's wrong or fix them, or you're actually you're actually allowing them to open up. Which, if I look at the conversations and the observances I've had of Morgan in her practice, and I look at other people, they talk about that a lot. They talk about opening their field, and then therefore, to the level that the client can opens their field, and then that's when the magic really begins. So I see it as a great way to open these kids up, instead of like holding them under the thumb, as we've done, and you pointed out earlier, what's been happening. So this is cool, very cool. Now you have a TV program that you're part of. I think actually two, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken, if I can remember.
yeah.
Okay,
I have
and
a
one of them is,
podcasting program
yeah,
that's called Conscious
yeah,
Living, and that's for centerforconsciouskids.com to support kids and families to be exposed to and their energy and their purpose and their mission and their process to create our world being very conscious in the community of schools, practitioners, events, and programs, food, all sorts of fun ways of living, consciously open and aware. And then also, I'm on a TV show now for 12 episodes. The first one just recorded, and it's on Awake TV network, and it talks about quantum energy healing. And that first episode yesterday I described, which we started with, was are we creating quantum energy healing in ourselves and our lives and for others, or are we creating quantum energy destruction?
Yeah.
Because we can do that too. Yeah. And I think people really may not be aware that their negative thoughts and feelings do impact others, directly or indirectly.
That's a deep, that's a deep subject. That could be 12 episodes by itself.
It could be. It could be. So what we're doing is supporting people and understanding that they can have clarity of thoughts. And when they have clarity of thoughts, they can also recognize that they can work with their emotions, that they can know that they're the creator and they're the source of their emotions. I have a dream one day that every 5-year-old, I think even younger now, maybe every 3-year-old or even infant, knows that others and life circumstances are not the source of their feelings. They are. Yeah. And when they know this, then they can change it. And for the empaths, we have a special secondary process. I get to teach them to really, without any blaming, to look inside and say, is that my feeling or is that someone else's feeling I'm physically feeling in my body? Because empaths have a hard time discerning where that feeling came from and how it got constructed. And then I teach them, depending on their age group, on how to support letting go of those emotions and then supporting the person that they're aware of that's having usually uncomfortable emotions. I can't wait till we attune children and other people to really feel people's happy feelings in their body, right? It's sometimes contagious when we're in front of a big entertainer or a comic who makes us all laugh, right, and enjoy our time together, right? Then that energy feeling of emotion can be very contagious too. But a lot of times in our everyday life, we're very attuned to negative emotions. Yeah, and I think as a society, we can attune ourselves to both and know how to navigate those.
Well, what I find mind-blowing is like creative ideas like yours and so many people out there, how not just the fact that it's going to change the environment, but also change it very rapidly. And I just picture like having this type of dialogue, not instruction, talking in elementary school, as opposed to the ABCs and all that, all the stuff all the other stuff. But can you imagine kids actually being indoctrinated in mass? It wouldn't even take, it would take a small, strong minority of kids, just the energetic impact they'd have because they're already having it anyway. I mean, the truth is we could all flatline right now and just level off, and they're already coming. And the more of them that are here, the more it's changing, and nothing's going to have to be said. But it's a big, beautiful future due to these creative initiatives that are taking hold around the earth, such as yours and with you and your colleagues. And I commend you for that. I look forward to collaborating with you again and again. And thank you for sharing space with us. Thank you.
The dog is too. Thank you.
Always comes in right on time, so I know he's saying something to me. But you take care. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Peace
Thank
out,
you, everyone.
All right.
Bye bye.
Yeah, y'all take care. Bye bye.